Hi there, it's me again, Chief Archon, today I'm going to talk about dice systems in the Strange RPG. The Strange is a book I just received through the post today, though I've had the PDF for it for quite some time. It's an amazing book. It's 412 pages from Monte Cook and Bruce Cordell. Its predecessor, the book that came out before it, is Numenera, and that book is just as big, and they both have the same system, the cipher system. The reason that I mention Numenera is because they are the same system known as the cipher system, and you can use them interchangeably with each other. So both systems literally provide you with double the amount of things to use in your game. Now, the dice system used in The Strange is the D20, and the sometimes you will use the D100 on tables, perhaps. I think you might use a D6 for some things. The attributes used in The Strange are, there's only 3 of them: might, speed, and intellect. These are they're stats, but they're also pools. So you'll have a pool for might, a pool for speed, and a pool for intellect. And these pools, they go up and down as you use them, as things happen to you, and they're also your hit points. So when all 3 pools are full at their maximum, or you have points in all 3 of your pools, then you're said to be hale and hearty. One pool has been reduced to 0, then you're said to be impaired, and then the game works a little differently for you. Certain things become more difficult. When all 3 of your pools, when 2 of your pools are at 0, then you're said to be debilitated, and sometimes that may even mean you can't even move. When all 3 of your pools go to 0, then you're dead. You'll use these pools also to perform special abilities, but we'll get to that in a minute. Difficulty levels in The Strange go from a scale of 1 to 10. And that is based on life. You know, people say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think of that? How do you think that's likely to be? On a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is this? So that's what it's based on, because it is a value system that pretty much everybody knows, the scale of 1 to 10. You know, if it's 1, it's bad. If it's 10, it's good. If it's dependent on the difficulty you're talking about. If you're talking about difficulty, if it's 1, it's very, very easy. If it's 10, it's nigh on impossible. Now, you reduce that scale when the GM gives you that difficulty. Say you're saying, oh, I want to climb a wall. The GM will give you a difficulty, but it won't be based on you or your group. It'll be based on the average person. So, for instance, you know, you think about your checkout girl or checkout boy at your local supermarket. You know, how easily will they find it to climb the wall? And that's what it might be. Let's say, for instance, we'll use the wall as an example, because that's one of the ones given in the book. So you've got this you've got this girl, checkout boy or checkout girl, and they want to climb the wall, and the GM says, oh, let's call that a scale of 5, difficulty of 5. You would then use various things to try and reduce that difficulty, and reducing is dealt with in steps. So for every point you reduce that difficulty scale by, you've taken it down a step. If something makes it go up for some reason, it will go up a step. So you will reduce it with skills, special abilities, assets, something called effort, which we'll explain later, and ciphers, which are supernatural items and artifacts, and finally XP. And yes, you do use XP, you do spend XP in this game as well, to perform various tasks. Talking about tasks, when you have worked out the final difficulty, having reduced it with all that you can reduce it by, that difficulty, remaining difficulty, turns into a task, which is 3 times that remaining difficulty. It's always 3 times. So let's say with skills and with various advantages, the checkout girl or checkout boy reduced that difficulty of 5 to 3. It then turns into, from a difficulty, into a task. The climbing of the wall is a task. And that would then, if it's 3, it goes to times 3, so the task is 9. 3 times 3, 9. And that's what they will roll the D20 against. So difficulty, if the final difficulty is 2, when it turns into a task, it becomes 6, and you roll the D20 against 6. Now those of us who are savvy enough was probably sitting there and working, hold on, if you can't reduce it for some reason and it's 10, what does that mean? Well, it means that the task becomes 30, and yes, you're trying to roll that on a D20, which is frankly just impossible. You can't get that on a D20, so you need to reduce it. If you reduce a difficulty down to 0, then it becomes routine. You can do it. You don't need to roll. Obviously, if it's 30, you don't need to roll. You can't do it. So that's how it works. You need to roll equal to or greater than on that D20 against the task, by the way. So if your task is has turned out to be a 9, then you need to roll 9 or higher on your D20. Let's have a look at some of the things now that would reduce that difficulty. Well, you could have skills. Skills are simple. You're either not skilled at something, or you're trained, or you're specialized. If you're not skilled, well, that you can't reduce it. You can't reduce the difficulty with skill. If you're trained, you reduce it by 1 step. If you're trained at a skill that can be used. So if your difficulty is 5, you'll reduce it to 4 if you're trained. If the next level above trained is specialized, and that allows you to reduce that difficulty by 2 steps. So obviously with 5, which would turn into a task of 15, if you've managed to reduce that 5 to with a specialized skill to 3, because the specialized skill reduces it 2 steps, leaving it at that 5 to 3, then it goes into the 9, and then you'll be rolling 9 or higher on a D20. So that's skills. You're either not skilled, you're trained, or you're specialized. Assets. Well, remember we said assets. Well, an asset is any advantage. It could be tools, it could be higher ground, it could be circumstance. You can get a maximum of 2 steps of reduction from your difficulty based on various assets. But only ever 2 steps. After that is effort. Now, remember, every stat has a pool. Effort is the one stat on your character sheet that governs how much effort you can put into something. So as a starting character, you'll have an effort of 1. Now, let's have a look at a pool. let's have a look at the might pool. You want to climb that wall. Let's say it's might. Let's say it requires strength instead of speed here. You have a pool, let's say of 10, and you want to use some of that effort, some of that pull from your might to reduce your difficulty, which we've already reduced with a skill down to a difficulty of 3. You want to reduce it down a little more. You would then use your some of your pull. Now the pull from your might, the first time you want to use it, it's going to cost you 3 points, and that will reduce the difficulty by 1 step. So you spend your 3 points from your pull. Your pull's now gone down 10, 9, 8, 7. So it's now 7 points, and you are able to reduce your difficulty again. So that difficulty that went down from your skill to 3 has now gone down with your effort to 2. Edge is another part of that equation. Edge makes it cheaper. So instead of you having to spend 3 points from your pool, if you have an edge of 1 in your might pool, then the final total that you're spending from that pool for that thing you're trying to do goes down by 1, because your edge is 1. So it goes down from having to spend 3 points from your pool, it goes down to having to spend 2 points from your pool, but it's an end total. If you had an effort value of 2, then you could reduce it twice. You could put 2 levels of effort in, which of course would reduce the difficulty not just by 1 but by 2. The first point, remember, costs 3 from your pool. The second point only costs 2, and if you had an effort of 2, you could do that. You could do that twice, and the end result, if you still had that one edge, the end result would be not 5 but 4 points spent instead, because remember, edge will take the final expenditure and reduce it by the value of the edge. So that's what effort does, the pool that's in your stat does, and what your edge does. The next thing, of course, is ciphers and artifacts. Now, ciphers and artifacts are special items that hold power in one way or another. Sometimes they'll do things that allow you to reduce a difficulty value. Sometimes they'll do something wholly other. You know, they may allow you to make a clone or something. It all depends, but they are very fundamental items. You find them everywhere. The players will run into ciphers all the time. Ciphers are one-use items. Once you use them, they're gone. Artifacts, on the other hand, are items that you can use again and again and again, providing you roll okay at the end, because once you use it, you roll to see if it's still working. Again, that's on a scale of 1 to 10. So a specific cipher might say this cipher keeps working unless you roll a 1, and then you just keep rolling every time you use it. And if when you eventually roll a 1, that's it. Sorry, the artifact. When artifacts here, then the artifact is done. Ciphers and artifacts are one of the few things in the world that will go from reality to reality with you. Realities in this game are going to another reality is called a recursion. You translate to another recursion, but I'll explain translating recursions in another video. But your ciphers and your artifacts will go with you. If you've got a screwdriver, you've got a drill, you've got a sword, that's not going with you. That will not cross over with you. But if your sword is a cipher, or an artifact, it will transfer over with you. It might not look the same at the other end, but it will do the same thing that it did where you were before. So that's another really cool thing about ciphers and artifacts. The last thing when we describe difficulty and adjusting difficulty is GM intervention. That's a slippery one, because you might have reduced everything and then all of a sudden the GM turns around to you and says, okay, you might have reduced this down to 2 difficulty, but hey, guess what? GM intervention. And the GM intervention is something that happens to you that is not generally good. Something unexpected has happened to you. Maybe you gave that killing blow to the NPC, but the GM says, actually, no, GM intervention. They didn't die. And you have a choice when the GM intervention comes up of either not accepting it and spending a point of XP, because it'll cost you to turn that GM intervention down, or to accept it and gain an XP. And that's one of the ways in the game that you gain XP. You don't gain XP from monsters in this game. You gain XP from discovery and from GM interventions. And when you get your XP, if you accept it, you say, okay, fair enough, I accept that. You'll get your XP, but you'll also get another XP to give to a fellow player of your choice. You'll need to explain why you've given that to that player, but it's your choice all the same. Generally speaking, there'll be one such GM intervention in the game per hour that the game will go on for. It doesn't mean that you'll necessarily get a GM intervention once every hour. It could be that GM plans to have the game going for 4 hours, and he might do all the 4 GM interventions all in one go. One last thing about GM interventions is that when you roll a 1 on the D20, you get a GM intervention that you don't get XP for. That's effectively equivalent to botching in any other role-playing game. So, to go back to the dice system in quick explanation, you have difficulties from 1 to 10. You reduce your difficulties with skills, abilities, assets, effort, and ciphers and XP. Your remaining difficulty gets tripled to become a task that you will roll your D20 against, and you must roll equal to or higher than that final task value, and watch out for GM interventions. If you liked this video, please like it and think of joining my YouTube, and that way you'll get information when I'm doing another video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.